If you are feeling stressed or worn out by the demands of daily life, you are certainly not alone. A best-selling author and artist, Ruth Chou says there's a different way to live, one that invites us to slow down, let go of what we can't control, and trust God's care. My Faith Nation co-host John Jessup sat down with her to talk about her new devotional, The Way of the Wildflower.
Are you anxiously spinning, fretting, fearful? Well, listen to what Jesus says in Luke chapter 12, verse 27. Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not toil or spin. I'm here in my Colorado mountains, and I can't help but observe how the wildflowers grow. You see, the wildflowers live dependent, resilient, beloved, unhurried, and free.
We're joined now by author Ruth Chou here in our Washington, D.C. studios. We're a long way from those beautiful wildflower fields in Colorado. Thank you for making time for us. So you have a new book called The Way of the Wildflower. It's out and very timely because we see studies that constantly confirm that people are anxious or feeling stressed these days. We don't have to go into the reasons why, but your book focuses on encouraging people to slow down and consider how God cares for the littlest of His creations.
He does.
Talk about the inspiration behind the book.
You know, I've always loved Jesus' words in Luke 12, do not worry and consider the ravens, consider the flowers of the field. And this, the past couple of years, I've had a couple of very anxious, seasons of different things that I really wanted to figure out in my life. And I would take these walks and I would take Jesus' words literally. Consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't toil or spin. And I feel like a lot of times my mind is spinning or toiling and I'm worried about things. But Jesus' answer to us worrying was actually to consider how He takes care of everything that we're worried about.
I'm guilty of that too. I think we all are. We just get so obsessed with the things that are on our minds. Yeah. Your book, though, I just also want to highlight how beautiful it is. It features not only your writing, but your artwork with watercolors on every page that show different species of wildflowers. Can you talk about what you learned through the journey of writing this book and in the process of just being out there and walking and talking with the Lord?
Well, I find it so fascinating that wildflowers grow up everywhere, places where you don't think wildflowers will survive, in rocks, along sidewalks. And so I found that they were totally dependent. They really need God to provide the water they need, the nutrients they need. They're resilient. They can grow up where there's almost like nothing around them that is supplying what they need, but they still are resilient enough to grow up in the rocks. So they're dependent, they're resilient, they're free, they're not bound by fences, they're unhurried, they have certain seasons that they grow in, not every season, and they're beloved, they're treasured exactly for their unique qualities. And so those were the 5 characteristics that I noticed as I was writing this book.
That's beautiful, and I think those things that God can also plant and seed deep within us, right? You write about living with wildflower faith, that's a tongue twister, embracing dependence on God and an independent culture. Talk about what you mean about that and how we can respond to that.
We live in a culture where it's, I am my own boss. I call the shots, and that seems like freedom, and that seems like true independence. But in God's economy, it's surrender and depending on Jesus and actually relying on Him for everything we possibly need, both spiritually and physically. That's actual true freedom. That's dependency is where we find actual freedom to walk in the way that God's intended for us to walk, because He actually created us to have fellowship with Him and to rely on Him.
In our final seconds, I want to hit on one more meditation from the book. You talk about, or you write about weakness, and weakness isn't something that you suggest should be feared, but an opportunity to experience God's sufficiency and His grace and His power. I know so many of us wrestle with control and giving that, ceding that to God. Can you talk about what we can learn from understanding that God can use our weakness for His strength to be glorified?
Well, it's in our weakness that He's made strong. And even Peter says in 1 Peter, cast your anxieties on Him. And he says, humble yourself. It's a posture of the heart to say, I am weak. I can't do this all, but if I cast my anxieties on you, you will care for me. That's what Peter says in 1 Peter.
I think everyone should pick up a copy of the book. What I am feeling from you, from what you've written, I just feel it right here in the presence of the studio. So thank you for writing the book. Ruth Chou, your book is called The Way of the Wildflower. Congratulations, and thank you for making time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.